you guys want to give your background and exactly what you do right now, please?
Hi, I'm Steph, and Divergence Supplements is now my life. So I'm first and foremost a mother. I have 2 boys, 22 and 4, and partner, Christian. He's wonderful. I have a background. I'm a reformed ad woman. I think that's the best way to put it. Worked in the industry for many years, and felt that it was my life for a long time. But then woke up to a wider world where I could do more good, and that became my purpose, to actually create products, brands, businesses that impact for good. I'm MBA faculty, and entrepreneur in residence for a Neurodiversity called One Day, and DS is absolutely it right now. I have a book coming out later in the year, but I've pushed back on that. The last project I worked on was with Bear Grylls, Dr. Alex George, who's just come on board, and Paul McKenna. It's a men's mental wellness tool called app called Metal. So everything that you can see in the last couple of years has been focused on helping people and doing good and products with purpose.
So Bear Grylls, that's the guy who ate like bugs and stuff on the TV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best man to know resilience and mindset, I guess.
So actually, there's that. Metal is the most brilliant app. It's all science backed. I mentored Neil, the founder. I became his first angel investor, and I was the first person on the founding team, and worked and helped bring people in who are working on it even now. And it's about to launch in a few weeks. And I'm terribly excited because, again, these are products that are going to do so much good.
Yeah.
That we've all got these amazing talents, and it goes back to what you were saying before. We've all got these amazing talents, and I don't think it's laziness. I just think we've lost purpose. And if we know that we're on the right course and we're actually going to be making change and doing good, that gives you energy, that gives you excitement, it gives you that push. Work ethic just goes through the roof when you're going to do something that's going to benefit so many people.
Not to be cynical about this, but I think another thing that's underestimated massively is having that mentor there to talk you through the process, giving you blueprint of not specifically what in the area that you're going into, but blueprint of business succession. And that's missing because there are so many, like the social media space is oversaturated with mentors. So
I hate it. Like, I'm a coach on this, and I'm like,
yes.
Okay. And actually, do you know what? When I was saying that, then I always felt apologetic for sharing what I've been doing and what I'm doing. Like, there's almost kind of like a kind of holding back until, I don't know, I've got some very high standards.
Yes.
And my expectation of myself is incredibly high. And I almost feel like I'm not quite there. I haven't done enough yet. I've got to keep going, got to keep pushing. And
that's also a neurodivergent. I don't know. Absolutely, it's a neurodivergent, right? It's a neurodivergent, it's the burnout. But this is why I'm so lucky, because of my family setup and my life, and my co-partners, in this business, my co-founders. I am surrounded by brilliance. They always say, work with people smarter than you. God, no, but that's what you do. And if you're smart, you don't want to be the cleverest person in the room. I had a conversation with someone a while ago, and she literally, she was a bit drunk. She went, I don't know anyone as clever as I am. I don't meet anyone as and I just went, oh my God, to have that kind of mindset, that's baffling. And I just feel really lucky that I just get to work on products that are going to change people's lives.
Yeah.
But that was a choice.
Yes, 100%. That does make sense, because I think I end up meeting people with mid-level IQ or EQ, and they always have the same problem where they're constantly saying, oh, I don't meet the right people who can stimulate my mindset. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but if you speak to hyper intellectuals, people who are, say, above 135 IQ, they never have this problem, because they know the situation, they found a solution, and now they are using, or I would say creating a framework for everyone to benefit. And then subsequently, I put this saying up on my Instagram. this morning that it's the people who are often focused on getting what they want don't get what they want, and people who are focused on giving value end up getting what they want.
Okay, I'm going straight to Instagram. I'm like reposting that. I love me.
Yeah, if you want to just cover off your background.
100%. So I'm Lara. I'm a clinical nutritionist. I'm the Divergence Supplements product, co-founder of Divergence Supplement. You might call me, co-founder and also chief product officer potentially. My background is quite diverse. So my academic background was psychology. I've got a bachelor's of science in psychology. I have a master's of neuroscience specializing in neurodegeneration. And I have subsequently retrained also in clinical nutrition and in naturopathy. That wasn't always my occupation. I actually worked for one of the Financial Times companies in between my bachelor's and my master's. I was lucky enough to be sponsored for an H-1B visa when I was, 21 years old. And when a 21-year-old is offered a visa to go and work on Fifth Avenue, in one of the FT companies, at the time it's since been sold, it's exciting. And so I was pulled to the dark side, and I worked in financial service and the investment services arena for about 12 years, I want to say, about 12 to 14 years. In between that, I came back from living in New York and did my master in neuroscience, then got pulled back into financial services again. I'm a recovered financial service sales rep. In recovery, in remission. But I was in this career for a long time, and on the side, I was always interested in nutrition. I competed in kickboxing when I was a teenager. I've done marathons, I've done ultra marathons, I've done bodybuilding, I've done different martial arts, mixed martial arts, BJJ and Muay Thai and all sorts, and and triathlons and Ironman as well. And so I've always looked at how I can support my own performance nutritionally, and I didn't realize I was really performing clinical nutrition. And doing all of that alongside kind of retraining and also working in the investment service industry, which is very fast paced in London. I was suffering from, burnout and low mood and those kind of things, which I also found out was a trait from, kind of my neurodivergent condition too, being ADHD. But I was supporting my own health naturally anyway. And then when I stumbled across clinical nutrition, I really thought, my goodness, I found my calling. So I embarked on further education there. And was doing that alongside my investment services career for quite a while. And, I had my own practice, Holistic-Health by Lara, with a W. Unfortunately, I didn't think about saying that when I created the names. I was always going to be saying that, WH. But I found that actually it was soul-destroying working in an industry where my colleagues were great and I absolutely loved my clients. And my interactions with my clients were, the best thing about the role. But it was soul destroying thinking, okay, I'm contributing to, the kind of economy, but what am I actually providing? How am I impacting these people's lives? And, the biggest impact I had, I think, was when I would meet with my clients and we'd start talking about nutrition. We'd start talking about, longevity and sports performance and those kind of things. And I really loved that. And, I made the decision to step away from that industry and to work full time in clinical nutrition and to start developing supplements, one of which is Divergence Supplements with Steph, co-founding the company. And this is really, for me, helping people, creating an impact, especially in an area where there isn't really another product that's doing this type of thing or solving this type of problem, is really what gives me purpose and energizes me. And I found when I was working in investment services, I was bringing in the money and I was serving a function, but I felt like I didn't have meaning, even though I was always trying to book in my next race and my next triathlon and my next Ironman. I was thinking, there's got to be more to life. But I was striving for something all the time, like striving for a new goal. And that interest cycling does come with also, being ADHD. But, I was striving for something that I couldn't find. And now having stepped away from that industry into doing something so much more impactful, it gives me purpose. And I genuinely love my day to day. I get up, I'm looking at the latest, science articles, whether that's neuroscience, whether that's clinical nutrition or nutritional psychiatry, which is a term used a lot in the US, but not so much over here. Whether that's looking after my two beautiful Klikai, which are like mini husky dogs in my life. But, it's given me a new zest for life, working in this industry. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where things go.
There's huge egos in NHS, and that becomes an issue because you have people with predisposed beliefs when it comes to pharmacology or health or medical system, and you're trying to reason with them with logic and recent peer-reviewed studies. It's not always easy, because I was arguing with this professor a couple of months ago, and he's like 65 years old. He's done this for 37 years now. He's like, this kid come and telling me exactly how to manage our client. I was like, listen, I'm not recommending anything. I'm suggesting that you implement following medication. So some of the things like rapamycin, metformin, these have shown incredible results in cancer patients.
Do you want to look at things like medicinal mushrooms too?
Turkey tail.
Yeah. So see, that would we first need to get the patients that we have on board. We first need to take in phase 1. Once we have addressed phase 1, because you look at most of these patients, they have no idea what's going on. They're sitting and getting their chemo, and they're being served orange juice.
Yeah, and then having a packet of crisps. So yes,
a bit to keep their weight up.
That's right. Absolutely.
Same thing when you give blood. They give you biscuits, they give you crisps, they give you juice.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think just pulling it, a little bit back. I understand pharmacology is huge. It's incredibly profitable. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to go against it, because I'm going to get deplatformed, and I'm going to run into major issues, even from our insurance company point of view, from our indemnity standpoint. So I was like, let's work alongside these guys. And I would say probably about 80% of the GPs and ethical doctors, because there are some really good, amazing ethical doctors out there who would be open to sit down and research it. So it's more of a brain of a doctor who comes from a science background to explore,
Well, like UCL, for example, have now got an integrative department. They have for many years, but there is now more attention on functional medicine, on integrating different types of therapies, which is fantastic.
Yes, absolutely.
It's funny that you mentioned the studies, because we've been taking courses to understand the subject matter better. And we've been discovering that the courses are actually out of date. But we're taking a really positive, pragmatic approach. We're actually contacting them and saying, excuse me, actually, and Lara's been doing a great job reaching out to a couple of academic bodies, saying we might be able to nudge you in the right direction with updated information for your courses.
In regard to nutrition, nutrition interventions. There are some top institutions out there which who are doing amazing jobs in the industry, but many of them still don't really regard nutrition as into their integrative approach. Maybe might focus on things such as kind of apps and things that can help individuals, or medications. And Steph's very good at this side of things. Actually, you're the app queen. But absolutely, when it comes to the neurodivergent space. But some of these big institutions, the most that they'll recommend is omega-3. And actually, with regard to the neurodivergent community, there are so many associated deficiencies that are just not being taken into account. And it's in the research. It's not just in small clinical trials. It's in huge meta-analyses that are gold class in the industry. So when I've done some of these kind of almost treat them like CPD courses out of interest, just to see what they're saying, I've actually been contacting a few of them saying, look, have you considered this or that? So a few of them have actually sent me their presentations and their course materials for me to take a look and suggest updates and things like that. So it's quite nice to be able to do that and try and update the educational material as we go along, but not in a challenging way, more in a supportive, integrative way, as you mentioned.
There was the moment of doing the course and saying, oh, have you done this bit yet? Just yes, I have. Oh my God. And then it's just like, they're completely missing, so much. And, I'm not the clinical nutritionist. That's Lara's role.
Sure.
But just from learning from her and the awareness that you build and the knowledge that you grow through osmosis half the time. But just being that awareness, it's just, for us, it's omnipresent now. But for so many normal people, there's no knowledge.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's just not even a consideration.
That's the issue. So even when we are looking at, when we're onboarding clients and we're going through their daily routine, on sleep, on their nutrition, on their relationships, on their stress levels, on their work. They are living probably on average 3 out of 10 life. The quality of life is probably no more than 3 out of 10. Now, it takes sometimes probably about 30 to 50 questions, depending on the type of person, to unmask that situation and kind of really get to the meat and bones of the situation. But it's crazy because people don't know the basics, and there is over-reliance on our medical system for help. And I always say to people that, listen, our NHS, with it's here or somewhere, in the United States, it's a medical system. If I break my leg, 100% I'm going to be running to NHS for sure. I need scans. I need them to patch me up. I need them to stitch me up for sure.
They're fantastic for traumatic injuries. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. But preventative care?
Exactly, precisely.
I'm going to have to jump in. I'm raw for the NHS. The NHS has been there for me in some serious car crashes, any kind of emergency situation. There's nothing better. And, I've seen things in the States where a best friend was in anaphylactic shock and was being passed from one ambulance service to another. Like it was scary. And, they were making him sign documents, between ambulances. So the way our ambulance service was, I will roar for the NHS. It needs an upheaval internally. The management consultants might need a little nudge, but it's a fundamental service that we need to nurture and take care of. However, the disparity between the NHS working with holistic functional medicine, private medicine services, we even see that right now with neurodivergent diagnoses. The backlog in the UK is, in some places, in some local health authorities, is up to 4 years. Mm-hmm. And that's untenable when you look at the NICE guidelines suggesting if you have a suspected neurodivergence, you should be tested within 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So right there, there's an issue. But we have a GP on our advisory board, and she's also a GP trainer. Mm-hmm. And I had a private diagnosis. I'm lucky enough to be able to afford to do that, unlike many people in the UK. And it was very thorough. Lots of family members questioned. It went on and on. But there are so many people now going for private diagnoses, and then the GPs are not, within the NHS, are not able to give them medicine and give them their stimulant medication because the rules are changing.
Yeah.
And there's this disparity, and we're seeing so many people at a loss of, I've had this diagnosis, but what do I do?
Yeah, and that's a question. Another thing is, I think when we're talking about sort of 4 horsemen of death, we're talking about, heart problems. Number 2 is cancer, the big one. Number 3 is going to be the neurodegenerative. And number 4 is diabetes, type 1, type 2, that spirals out of control with everything else. How do you actually... I know the difference, but it'd be good for you guys to actually share the difference between neurodivergence and neurodegenerative illnesses.
100%. So I specialize in neurodegeneration, or I have done in the past when I did my neuroscience masters. Now, you could say that neurodivergent actually isn't a neurodegenerative disorder. It's actually, there's certainly differences in the neurodivergent brain, but it's not in a neurodegenerative aspect, so to speak. So neurodegenerative really is when you have a degeneration of neurons. So we're looking at things like multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, where areas of the brain are really atrophizing, so they're getting smaller. You've got neurons which are dying off in certain areas of the brain, for example, which impact memory, which impact movement. Now, in the neurodivergent brain, there are some differences in the brain. So most people would think of it as strictly a dopamine issue. And I think in the past, it's been thought of as a dopamine issue. And certainly that is is one of the main hallmarks of things like ADHD. Dopamine is one of the main neurotransmitters. It's involved in motivation, in focus, also in mood, attention.
Yeah, kids with the iPad and cell phones.
Well, yeah, exactly. All of those things, they're designed to give us an increase in dopamine and get us addicted to iPhones and iPads and these kind of things. But
in the neurodivergent brain, it's not just dopamine, and research is showing actually there are differences in the cortical mass of the brain in areas, but not in a neurodegenerative way necessarily, in the frontal cortex and cerebellum, in the parietal lobes, in the amygdala, in the hypothalamus. And these are all areas which connect together to control our executive function. So that's things like cognition, attention, focus, ability to plan, ability to organize ourselves, our emotions, our impulsivity. And these are areas where actually the grey matter in the brain is less in those regions in the neurodivergent brain.
Sure.
So it is a case of the brain structure being different, but not in a neurodegenerative way as you would see in a progressive condition like an Alzheimer's disease or an MS.
Understood. So the biological matter of the brain is structured differently.
And functionally, the systems work differently too.
Okay, so here's the question. So I'm gonna be, play a devil's advocate to say, okay, I'm the other side. So I would ask anyone who's basically coming in with this with this diagnosis to say, okay, how much of this, what's going on right now, is contributed to our epigenetics, especially in children, because now it's like through the roof, and up till 5 years ago, not many people knew about it, right? But now I have seen so many incredibly bright people. Like I'm talking about straight aces from like cognition point of view, intellectual people, hyper intellectuals, literally relying on medication and coming off their pursuits and in terms of creating something amazing or becoming a forensic psychologist or just taking their career forward because they have abused their neurocircuitry to the point where it's actually become now, and I'm talking about young people, I'm talking about 16, 17, so your brain is still malleable, right? And how do you actually then say, okay, this is actually genetics play a part for sure, but how do we actually pull a difference to say, no, this is actually not epigenetics? Or would you think that it's a combination of both, where epigenetics will play a massive part in the direction of this?
Well, this depends on who you speak with.
And even Steph and I might have different views on this, but I'll let Steph start on this one.
So I can only speak from experience.
Sure.
And my diagnosis came from reading an article in a newspaper and seeing a mirror image of my life. This guy saying, I've had my adult diagnosis, and I was so aghast. I'd had doctors trying to put me on antidepressants, and I was literally like, do not give me that stuff.
Sure.
Being told I had depression, I was not depressed. I'd been told I had anxiety, OCD, and the list went on.
Sure.
And I called my partner in. I was like, I have to read this to you, Christian. Like, listen. And he just stood there. He's like, you need to go for a test. And subsequently, I just kept looking on social media. But when you're in that kind of situation, it's an introspective kind of moment. It's a pause. And I looked at my mother, and I looked at my sister, and I looked at my family members. And my mother has 3 degrees in different subjects, and she's had 5 careers. She's 82. She's still teaching. She is fiercely clever, but also desperately bored at times. And we now look at her, and all of the signs were there. It's just the awareness wasn't.
Sure. So bored whilst she's not pursuing something which is incredibly challenging.
Something novelty-based that was different. Yeah. So everything had to be a step to push her further.
Sure.
She is innately built. She has that type of character as well. And I'm not saying it's in everyone, but she has the innate character to always be pushing herself and challenging herself because she wants to see results. She's very results-driven.
Love to meet her.
And the fact that she's writing a script for a movie at the moment.
Wow.
Well, sorry, 83. So when I sat there and looked at her, oh my God, you are the ADHD poster girl, right? And it was a real moment of then I started looking at my kids and having an awareness. And my eldest, he was diagnosed at university, and he's just finished his master's degree, but he was diagnosed at 21. And now my youngest, who's 4, and spotting all of the micro actions, micro interactions, behaviors. And there is no question for me that this is a genetic issue that's been passed down. But in terms of the epigenetics, crikey, where do we start? So I've OD'd on the books, from Gabor Mate to, you could go crazy with it. Andrew Huberman did an amazing podcast.
He's wonderful.
Right. Because he didn't sugarcoat anything. And actually, one of the things that is a bit misunderstood, that he really clarified for me through this kind of study of the epigenetics of it, but it's not actually the dopamine that's the key. It's the precursors to the dopamine. It's the adrenaline. It's the epinephrine. And what's the common understanding is so misconstrued.
Sure.
And this is where we have a big gap. And then, this is my pigeon understanding of it. But it's all introspective and awareness based. But this is, I think, where we're very keen to also dispel a lot of myths and confusion, particularly around a lot of influencers at the moment who are jumping on a bit of a bandwagon, who are recommending certain things or suggesting certain things that
they don't qualify.
They're not science-backed.
Certain platforms, social media platforms that people go to now can be quite dangerous, because there are a lot of people who are very articulate, who say things with a lot of confidence and presence, and people will believe them. But that can be very dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's happening a lot in terms of, they're doing deep fakes nowadays. So I don't know if you've seen any. So it's like, and also you can get someone like Jay-Z to sing a whole track, and it's not Jay-Z. And it's a good track. So it's, I think this is where the society is going to, at some point. We had this conversation at my health club the other day, where a couple of moms were sitting and they were like, we're just doomed because of the social media. I was like, not so fast. I think I have my son, he's 3 years old, and I have great faith. I think they're going to have a amazing future, because everything's got a U-curve. Everything, nothing lasts for a very long time. Even if you're looking at from evolutionary biology point of view, we are always seeking that novelty, right? So right now, the beautiful, the sexy thing is Instagram and TikTok. It's going to hit we're in that U-bit right now, and as soon as we basically get to the other side, because sooner or later we're going to start to crave real, sitting down with people, talking to people, real connections, real intimacy, to the point, as long as you have got that realization. So I think that's what's going to come next, and that's going to be, luckily for younger children right now who may be addicted to iPads, that's what they're going to morph into, that era.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around personalization, because now with all of every technological advancement we have, but also whether it's medicine or otherwise, personalization is at the core of everything that we're doing, or every bit of progress that we're seeing. Do you think that actually we'll be able to start tapping into people's individuality to be able to almost temper where we're going to go in a positive way, hopefully?
Well, it depends on the age bracket. Because if you're talking about kids under I would say even young adults up to the age of 25, I've read endless studies, and even, Freud talks about this, who, he experienced like thousands of brains. Dr. Amen talks about it. He's brain scanner, number one recognized in US. And before the age of 25, your neurocircuitry is incredibly malleable.
I love him, by the way.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And because it's malleable, you can look to have an impact. And this is where I think epigenetics would play such a big part, because even when we are in my practice, even when we're talking to cancer patients, studies have reflected that although genetics it's the loaded gun, the trigger pulling mechanism comes from epigenetics. That's what Dr. Amen talks about as well, that we see epigenetics to be the main driver, not the genetics, because you can have predisposed position, but if your health's on point, your sleep is on point.
Yeah.
So, and most, I would say, even if you were to say, leave the nutrition to one side, leave your, consume alcohol, that's totally fine. And you have your, not have a good workout routine. But the master regulator of everything is the social circle around you, because that will have an impact on your master regulator, which is the stress management of your life.
So interesting you say that. So I was working previously on a project with the Bear Grylls team.
Oh, great.
For the new men's mental wellness app.
Okay.
And the research that came out of that was community-based kind of support.
Yes.
Was absolutely fundamental. And this is actually part of what we're doing. The core pillars of everything that we need to do: sleep, nutrition. These are core. You've mentioned alcohol. I stopped drinking a couple of years ago.
Yeah, same here.
Best thing I ever.
You mentioned community too, and if you look at the blue zones where you've got the highest rate of centenarians, actually community and purpose are some of the main things they've got in common across all these different regions. Most of them tend to follow a Mediterranean diet. Most of them tend to eat more fish,
Sourdough bread.
But yeah, exactly. However, the community and the purpose, so for example, Seventh-day Adventists, where they do a lot of missionary work, is actually one of the common denominators, not necessarily that religious sect, but having purpose and a sense of meaning is what helps people live longer. It promotes longevity. And going back to what you were saying, one of the likely reasons behind that, aside from, the psychology of purpose and meaning, probably because it's very soothing for the nervous system and reduces cortisol.
Well, absolutely. It does go back to our hormones 100%. I was training at this health club here in London, not too far from here, and this guy, he came up to me and was like, "Hey, dude, sorry to disturb, I just want to know, what's your secret? What's the secret sauce? Is it like, what's your cycle?" I'm like, cycle? Like, I drive everywhere. I knew exactly what he meant, but he's alluding to steroids, right?
Oh, crikey.
Yeah. So
Sorry, that like straight over my...
yeah, so a cycling is like you cycle steroids,
Okay.
On and off peak, so you don't stay on it for a prolonged period of time. It's very toxic to your organs. But anyway, so that's the question, and it's not the first time. I get that asked a lot. Okay. But I said to him, I was like, listen, I'm actually not taking any steroids at all. I haven't dabbled into it at all. But let me ask you a few questions about you. What's going on with you? And this guy was, I think 46 or 47. And he was like, well, I train every day 2 hours. I train 7 days a week. It's pretty aggressive. My
Cortisol.
Yes, that was contributing factor. But then I was like, okay, tell me more. And I was like, okay, so you're training 7 days a week. It's like on the 7th day, I come to the gym, but I don't actually physically train. I just hit the spa. I take it easy. So it's pretty balanced. I'm like, okay, tell me a little bit more about your workout. So he was like, 3 days resistance training, 3 days I do more of a Tabata workout. So it's not taxing. So I was like, okay, so that's all dialed in. That's perfect. He did well financially. So he didn't have any money issues. I'm like, okay, tell me about your nutrition. He was like, yeah, I keep in line with my BMR. Everything, is calculated, macro is calculated. I'm doing 40% protein. So he knew his macro split, micronutrient split on point. I'm like, okay, so that's all good. I'm like, how about your sleep? He's like, I'm roughly getting about 7 hours right now. I'm like, okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, I'm seeing like 3 hour clubs. So that's not bad. I was like, so everything is dialed in. Now, I was like, okay, so you look, I would say, from aesthetic point of view, for a guy who's 47, you look 3 out of 10. Like, the dude did not look nice at all. Okay. Considering everything else that he was telling me, I was like, considering everything that you just told me is true, you don't look like someone who puts that much time and effort into, and money into, looking the way you do. So I'm like, so there's something else. I was like, tell me about your family. He was like, yeah, my youngest son, he's in boarding school. My sister, she lives in London. Mom, I see her twice a month. It's pretty good because she doesn't have too much time left. Or she's old. I was like, okay, that's all pretty normal. I'm like, what about your other half? It's like, yeah, her job is like incredibly stressful. She's a corporate lawyer, and she doesn't get too much sleep. And but we're trying to manage everything. But then as I keep diving more into it, It's like, relationship is completely broken. The intimacy is like once a month. So there are little resentment factors built in, which is causing chronic stress, micro-chronic stress moments. And before you know, I was like, okay, I need you to get your blood work done. He got his blood work done. His GP was like, it's totally normal. So his free testosterone out of, so they say any range between 900 and 300 is normal. But that data is pulled from norm of 1950s.
And it's a very wide range too, very wide range. It's basically trying to rule out, for Steph's, obviously Steph, this isn't her area. It's trying to rule out disease versus optimal functioning.
So, by the way, I love listening to Lara because I learn something every time. So, okay, bring it on.
Yeah, no, this is good. So his free testosterone indicates to how much, literally in the literal sense, is as men how much, or as females how much muscle mass retention you would have, and how much fat you would have or not have, right? Because the higher the testosterone is, the lower the estrogen and cortisol is, so therefore you build muscle, lose fat. When your testosterone goes down because your reproductive organs take a hit as you get older, your testosterone goes down both in men and women.
Yeah.
And as testosterone goes down, your cortisol and estrogen go up.
DHEA is, yeah, okay.
And aromatization tends to go up as well.
I'll go up, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then you don't feel good, you don't look great, and naturally but people continue to do what they did in their 20s, thinking, I just need to do that, but harder. That's why he's working out 2 hours an hour every day. So I was like, okay, so his testosterone came back at 480 and normal, free testosterone, and I was like, this is junk, this is garbage. It's testosterone's in the floor.
Did you look at the sex hormone binding globulin?
Yeah, I did. So everything was indicating that he's constantly promoting countering hormones, and that was having a derogatory impact. Why he would get more frustrated every single month when he's not actually able to optimize. So he was like, listen, and I would say that this guy was training hard. I mean, a lot harder than I was training. So I was like, there's something, there's a gap, there's something, yeah. So anyway, so got his blood works on, ended up speaking to his GP again. I said to him, look, listen, let's just go to HRT clinic. I'll recommend it to you. So you just basically go there. They will see exactly how do we want to optimize your natural test to what it was when you were younger, and they'll be able to pull up that data. They did, and literally he messaged me the other day to say, dude, I've never felt better. I look like $1 million. He's also, because when men are in that situation, their testosterone is taking a hit, the libido also gets impacted because the way you feel about yourself has an impact on your confidence and subsequently your libido and your sex life.
And most people don't realize low testosterone also lowers mood too. And so a lot of men who are going through the andropause, which is a thing most people don't understand either, actually end up being diagnosed with depression or anxiety.
We did a seminar on this at the Arts Club about andropause, because that's menopause for men. And a lot of people don't realize what this term is and how relevant this is, because this is directly correlated to the increased rates of suicide across the globe right now in men.
That's it. So one of the people on our board of advisors is the CEO of CALM, Campaign Against Living Miserably. Yeah. So, for us, we understand, suicide for neurodivergence, it's a much higher rate. It's, 1 in 4. So the number of suicides. So it's actually, again, for us, there are so many messages here underpinned by helping our community.
How would you? You guys are coming in with a brand, and we'll talk about that in a second, which is addressing the issue the issue that is existing. Let's talk a little bit about the cause of this. So in your research, what are some of the causes? Because naturally, we know about the increased use of iPads for children and dopamine spikes, and even norepinephrine that you mentioned that Huberman talks about, which is the precursor But then how do you, what kind of things have you actually noticed, which is amplifying this madness at the moment?
There are a few things here, and this is also an area I think where Steph and I might differ. It goes back to your comment on genetics and epigenetics too, and certainly with neurodivergent conditions, there is a huge hereditary aspect, very big. I haven't looked at the latest figures, but I think it's something like 50% hereditary, which is higher than I believe it's around that figure.
I mean, twins, I believe, are 100%.
Yeah, twins, 100%, absolutely. And you know, we're looking, this is kind of in the realms of what you would look at with an ApoE4 in Alzheimer's, which is, you know, very hereditary. So, you know, neurodivergent conditions, if you have a family member, a direct family member who has ADHD, autism, you're very likely to be on the spectrum somewhere. And when I say on the spectrum, I'm not talking about the autistic spectrum, I'm saying on the spectrum of neurodiversity. Now, when we look at genetics, firstly, that plays a big role, like I just mentioned. So it definitely gives you a predisposition. However, there are certain factors that exacerbate that. If we look at maternal nutrition, for example, even being deficient in vitamin D3, which is something I think in the Northern Hemisphere, in the UK, most people unfortunately are very deficient in D3, that maternal D3 deficiency can actually increase the likelihood of a diagnosis of ADHD in the young. What most people don't know as well, and what you kind of alluded to earlier on, is stress during the prenatal period. And if the nervous system is stressed during the prenatal period, so when the mother is, you know, when you're like 1 month into pregnancy, and especially in the last trimester, that actually sensitizes the nervous system of the fetus too. So when your child is born, they have a more sensitive nervous system and are more likely to be diagnosed with disorders of the nervous system and ADHD, anxiety, depression, those types of disorders. Now, if we look at nutritional deficiencies, and there are a lot of meta-analyses now that will support this, neurodivergent individuals are deficient, or they tend to be lower in plasma levels of omega-3, vitamin D3, unsurprisingly, B vitamins, again, unsurprisingly, they're nervous system calming, magnesium, zinc, and iron. So these are all nutrients which actually help to regulate the nervous system. Now, the nervous system being, in this case, regulating cognition, executive functions, cognition, attention, focus, motivation, mood, anxiety, impulsive behaviors. So it's not really surprising when we look at a lot of the characteristics in ADHD, in autism, which tends to be not just a lack of focus and attention, but impulsive behaviors, addictions, those types of things, low mood, propensity for emotional dysregulation, which actually people are only starting to pay attention to now. It's really not surprising that these associated nutrients tend to be low in this population. And as I said, you know, these aren't small studies on a few people. These are meta-analyses, which no studies are infallible. And, you know, there are certainly cases where people have even faked meta-analyses, unfortunately. You know, you can fake anything in this world, but meta-analysis tend to be the gold class study that we can go on. Meta-analysis being studies of studies, which generally mean you're looking at a higher population of individuals, so you can generalize the results more. So point being is these nutritional deficiencies, which might be influenced by maternal deficiencies too, but likelihood is also childhood nutrition. It's a lot more likely then to exacerbate the onset of a condition like ADHD or autism, especially if there's been a genetic predisposition in the first place. But there are other factors at play as well, and this is the area that Steph and I might differ on, in terms of there is a theory out there, as you've alluded to, with regard to iPads and iPhones, in that because they are designed to increase dopamine and, you know, consistently getting the dopamine buzz every time you hear a ping, every time you see the iPhone, every time you see a colour, that actually may potentially, there's not enough research into this yet, but may potentially dysregulate the dopamine system and neurotransmitter system, in a way bringing on a version of ADHD, not or executive dysfunction, as Steph may prefer. Exactly. Yeah. And maybe not in the way that we've historically thought about it, but certainly in a way that means dopamine is not necessarily working in the way that we would want. Our executive functions are dysregulated, and we are seeing hallmark characteristics that we would normally associate with neurodivergent conditions actually in people who wouldn't have otherwise been diagnosed but are now struggling with attention, with focus, with emotional dysregulation because they're so used to these hits of dopamine, they've become reliant on these stimuli to get that dopamine.
There are realities. You know, we're living in a world where the CEO of Netflix is quoted saying, you know, who's your biggest competitor? And he says sleep. So these products, these digital products are, you know, and I've worked on some in the past, you know, they are designed to keep you, they're to be sticky, keep you on them as long as possible and to engage with them as long as possible. There are question marks around it, but also you look at you've mentioned some of the experts, and, you know, there are question marks around having a natural predisposition or a genetic predisposition, but having an experience of trauma during childhood that might exacerbate the condition, so it presents more obviously. So there are so many micro expressions that we don't quite, the dots don't quite connect yet. You can make assumptions, you can surmise, but the data is the best thing we can do, and that's one of the biggest things for us. Everything is backed by data.
100%. All of the ingredients, or at least most of the ingredients, you don't necessarily have the same meta-analysis available for all of the botanicals at the moment, but wherever I can possibly, and I'd say for 99% of the ingredients, I've used meta-analyses to inform the ingredients. There are certainly ingredients that I would have liked to have included, but the data is certainly not there at the moment, which doesn't mean I don't stand by them if I'm going to suggest them to a client. Obviously, I work as a nutritionist too, or I take myself. But in this product, our KSP is that it is science-backed. And so I've relied on studies which are gold class in standard to make sure that, you know, we're presenting the studies on our site, which not many people do. And actually, there is some question marks around that from a medical standpoint. You know, a lot of the medical arena don't like people putting links to research because they think that's medicalizing a supplement. But we think it's very important to educate our audience and our clients too. And certainly, as a clinical nutritionist and naturopathic practitioner, one of my oaths, so to speak, was to educate and empower the clients that I work with, not just to tell them to take something and then hope they'll keep coming back to me. That's not what I do. I try and empower them so that they can then take their health into their own hands. And as Divergence Supplements, is exactly what we're doing too, by presenting the studies and saying, if you want to question an ingredient, have a little look at the research. And for most of that, you know, it's aimed at conditions and looking at things like Bacopa monieri and omegas and, you know, the standard vitamins and minerals, but also very niche botanical extracts that have been found to promote attention and cognition and things like that. For others, they're a little bit more difficult to decipher, certainly, and it might be that something has had an impact on a specific pathway, and it might be to do with the mitochondrial function and that kind of thing, which, to be fair, if a client was looking at that, or if one of our customers was looking at that, they might get a little bogged down in the science, but we're presenting it there so they can at least see, okay, well, this works on this function or this pathway. That actually has been associated with improved attention, improved focus, improved mood, lowered anxiety, those types of things. And we're looking at hitting this niche from various different angles. So I'm not just looking at kind of executive function, focus, things like that, focus and attention, as most people would think. I'm looking at lowering anxiety. I'm looking at increasing mood, elevating mood, emotional regulation.
The emotional regulation, sorry, you know, it's gold.
100%. And, you know, it's not just looking at vitamins and minerals. It's looking at amino acids. It's looking at digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, botanical extracts. So we're looking at the gut-brain axis. We're looking at brain function. We're looking at brain structure. We're looking at plasticity. We're looking at things that feed into the energy cycles physically and mentally. We're looking at neurotransmitter regulation, neurotransmitter synthesis. For anybody, you know, who doesn't know, neurotransmitters being the chemical messages in the brain which actually allow us to function and our brain cells to communicate. So that being said, you know, we're actually looking at this from a multifaceted perspective. We're not just saying, oh, you know, we need something to promote attention, in which case I'd probably just say, go with Bacopa monieri and omegas. If you were just looking at that. You know, we're looking at this from so many different standpoints and trying to say, okay, this isn't about just looking at neurotransmitter regulation. This is looking about how can I enhance the membranes in the brain? How can I enhance synaptic function? How can I enhance neurotransmission? How can I make sure that the myelination of the axons, which is basically almost like the, what would you call it? It's like the conductive material around our neurons that allow our neurons to talk. It's a bit like an electrical wire when you've got the insulation around it
There's another. How do those the mitochondria?
You know what I'm talking about? You know, when you've got electrical wire and it conducts the electricity. The myelination around it helps to enhance neurotransmission.
That's the failing action, isn't it? So when you fail, you actually learn through the behavior and it conducts it through that.
It's involved, but not quite the same. The myelination is actually something that's an issue in disorders like Parkinson's and MS, actually, when there's actually degradation in the myelin sheath, and which impacts neurotransmission. But I'm looking at this, obviously, because I've got a master's degree in neuroscience too. So I'm kind of looking at this from a bit of a science geek perspective, and I'm a complete geek when it comes to the research. Unfortunately, when I'm usually recorded, people fall asleep at the other side of a camera. But I've got the bachelor's in psychology, the master's in neuroscience. I've got 2 postgraduate diplomas, clinical nutrition and naturopathy, and actually one of those I'm currently in the middle of upgrading to a bachelor's in clinical nutrition too. I just love learning. But I look at this like I'm going to be 85 and still studying something. But all of these things, I'm looking at this. So what else can I look at? You know, we've got the myelin sheaths and we've got sons and we've got, you know, the brain cells. And I'm trying to pull it all together. And obviously the gut-brain axis, which is why we've got the prebiotics and probiotics and digestive enzymes. So we're looking at this in such a multifaceted approach.
It's neuro-wellness.
It is neuro-wellness. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So prebiotics. Do they actually? Because I'll easier question. I have so someone like me, because there are going to be different categories of people who this thing is going to be amazing for, the supplement. I'll give you my example. That someone like me, what am I missing that your supplement is going to bridge that gap? So my morning protocol, I hydrate with athletic greens. I don't know if you heard of them. So 75 different supplements. I do then D3, K2, the drops on top. Hydrate with about 1.5 liters of water as soon as I wake up with that supplementation. Omega-3s, just under 4.8 milligrams per day. So that would be my morning protocol, right? And then at nighttime, it's very simple. It's just one, magnesium.
Yeah.
The glycinate, just to fall asleep, right? That's
Taking magnesium in the morning as well?
not in the morning. I mean, there is some of it in my athletic greens, but my diet is on point to the point where I have red meat 4 times a week. I have fish, salmon about 4 times a week. So my food is incredible.
What does your vegetable and fruit intake look like?
Really balanced. So I would say probably about, if you were to take one plate, about 50% of that is that.
What vegetables and what fruit?
Dark skin. So I'm super keen because there is some level of neurodegenerative predisposition from my background. So I'm really hands-on with making sure that my neurocircuitry and neurons are working exceptionally well, as much as I can influence it. So my stress levels, as soon as I dabble into a stressful situation, which we all do, my main goal is to how do I actually minimize the time I spend in that situation, instead of just, thinking about it.
Could you give me an example of one of the, let's say, a lunch and a dinner that you have, and also some of the fruit that you have?
Yeah, so my lunch would normally be a cup of broccoli, salmon, with some carbs. It's all carbs would be more like brown rice, quinoa, sweet potato. I'm super keen on going with dark skin foods and fruits, because the pigmentation in the skin, it has higher levels of antioxidants, which is shown to promote the health of your neurons. So incredibly calculated there. But what for someone like me, what gap do you think this is going to bridge?
Well, without having a look at kind of your diet, just with regards to that, and there are 2 ways I'm going to answer this. Without looking at your diet, what I would say is diversity of vegetables and fruits is important. So it's not just going for the dark skin, it's going really in. It sounds a little bit cliche, but it's the rainbow vegetable. So it is the sweet potato. It's the...
Like my structure of, say, food and fruits, I would probably say my spectrum is probably the most diverse in according to the season that we're in. So I'm super like dialed in. So would you say that this is then because 99.9% of the people are not doing this, that's where the people need to start to?
I would say it depends on the person. So are you neurotypical, you're not neurodivergent? You could take this product and it would be basically a potent nootropic for you. So although it's aimed at the neurodivergent community, anybody could take it and it would enhance mental clarity, focus, attention, help regulate mood. Now, whilst your diet might be on point and your exercise, what you wouldn't be getting there is the benefits from botanical extracts like Bacopa monnieri and things like that. Your magnesium intake might be fantastic from your vegetables and you are taking some, but we're putting in, for example, in the daytime, a different type of magnesium, magnesium malate, which helps to feed into the mental energy cycle too. So malate is great in the morning, and this supplement's meant to be taken in the morning, whereas bisglycinate or a glycinate product is great for sleep because glycine supports the sleep cycle. You also wouldn't be getting a lot of the benefits of cognitively from these. So, for example, Bacopa monnieri, just to use that because it's one of the most well-known with regards to cognition, lots of research on that. It's been shown to enhance attention span, cognition, IQ, emotional regulation, those types of things. So whilst you're getting a lot of the phytonutrients and possibly more than 99% of the population, because you are very conscious of your diet and diversity of intake, which is amazing, you've got the antioxidants there, you're not necessarily getting these botanical extracts that can actually give you a bit of a step up above something like an AG1. So an AG1 is amazing, and I think that's incredibly well formulated. Huberman stands behind it, and I think Huberman is just the best. One of the best men in the world. Yeah, exactly. I've definitely got a man crush on him. My partner would be very upset if he knew how much I spoke about Huberman or listened to those soft, dulcet tones. It's fine. The soft, silky tones of that voice. But AG1 is fantastic, but this is a very different product, right? It's not just meant to be vitamins and minerals and the phytonutrients that you get from vegetables. It is very much containing potent nootropic botanicals. You would not eat Panax ginseng or Bacopa monnieri because you would gag. Now, even having a powder form of it, and before I put together this, I used to have Panax ginseng in powder form. I used to put it with Montmorency cherry juice just to make it palatable, and that's like syrup. And even then, I would nearly vomit at the taste. So these are kind of things that you would not eat yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, things like the sulforaphane that we put in there, and you're probably well versed with sulforaphane for hormonal regulation, otherwise known as DIM, as it's metabolized differently. You would have to eat a lot of broccoli sprouts and a lot of sprouts in general to get the amount of sulforaphane that we've got in here. And whilst there is absolutely no replacement for diet, and that is, a cornerstone of anything, this supplement has got the most absorbable forms of nutrient. It's got botanicals in there that you would not normally eat. It's got amounts of these ingredients, whether it's vitamins, minerals, amino acids, botanicals that you wouldn't get from food. Because it is designed not just to kind of support a healthy lifestyle, but to actually support conditions where people are deficient. And that being said, relying on food, again, I'm a nutritionist first and foremost. I don't, I'm not kind of a green pill, otherwise I'm just a green doctor, really. I don't want to do a pill for an ill. But it's not taking into account different abilities of absorption, for example, of gut health. And, if you've not got good gut microbiota, if you have got leaky gut syndrome or anything like that, then actually your ability to absorb nutrients from your food is very much, it is very compromised. Whereas this type of thing means that, okay, you might not be having a consultation with me as a nutritionist, and your diet might not be great. And obviously we would always promote that, and we're doing that on our site and education and that kind of thing. But you can still take this supplement, and hopefully for you, it will support whatever neurodivergent condition you have or whatever issues with emotional dysregulation or focus.
I think one of the key things here is that the product was developed with a purpose. Mm-hmm. There are many blends out on the market that are for optimum health or for a general kind of a shake or a drink that's actually to deliver a daily quotient. Okay. Sure. That's not why we created this. So this was born from a problem. And the problem was, why is there no one easy answer? Why are there all of these different bits of information being bandied about with no one actually giving a solid single source of truth?
And why is there a 4-year
wait list in this situation?
Nobody's thinking about the neurodivergent community.
And you know, with the diagnosis, when the origin story is, got the diagnosis, the stimulants didn't sit right with me, so I reached out to Lara and said, you know, what can we do here? She created me the most incredible stack, but the reality was I was taking 40-50 pills every morning.
Sure.
The spend, the cost. I was a maraca. The spend was extraordinary, and the time it took on a Monday morning with all my different pill pots to sort it out. And I was like,
How many pills were you taking?
like 40.
It probably wasn't quite that much. It was probably more like 25. But bearing in mind, Steph came to me, and I wouldn't do this with a client that came to see me because it'd be overwhelming, but Steph's a friend.
Yeah.
So with Steph, I thought, okay, well, we're going to do this, but is it going to be a lot? A client, I wouldn't put on more than a few.
There were about kind of 20 different types, but because you're taking 2 pills, I think the quantity was the thing that just got me. So
You need solid gag reflexes.
oh, dude,
Yeah.
I can shove fistfuls of pills in my mouth now. I'm a pro. I was like this, but like I was genuinely like this, and I was like, okay, we've got to do something better than this. Like, and that's when the penny dropped. You know, it really was a moment of, oh my God, I'm not alone. There are going to be so many other people who could benefit from a very simple, also neurodivergent. The being consistent, as someone with ADHD and now subsequently autism, suspected autism. I'm going through that diagnosis now too. But you know, having that kind of awareness of going, okay, let's make this easy for people. Let's do the good thing, do the right thing. Just because it's not always been done like this doesn't make it right. And let's shake things up. And the reality is, it's a whole new category because we've got such a growing community, because people, the cognitive, you know, any kind of divergence now, there's an awareness through social media. So the good of social media has led to this. And so many people are leading to the diagnosis. At the beginning of my journey, the data was showing like 8 to 10% of the population were neurodivergent. Now the data is suggesting 15 to even 20%.
Within what time frame?
That's 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's it.
It's going up.
Yeah, and that's the 15 to 20. They're now anticipating it will go up to the 20 mark. And the fact that we are a purpose-driven product, you know, we're here to solve a problem for people, to make their lives easier, to save them money, to give them the best outcomes, to give them a product that they've actually needed for a long time and haven't had access to remove the confusion, to offer support in a totally radical but even enjoyable way. It tastes like San Pellegrino blood orange. It tastes good. And you know, that shift in thinking, it's so overdue.
And, you know, just to add to what Steph's saying there, when Steph was taking these supplements, you know, Steph was taking them, she wasn't complaining at all. And, you know, she came to me and said, you know, you've actually really changed my life, like the difference in everything, emotional regulation, attention. And, you know, she asked me to create a stack. Now, originally, we weren't looking at a drink. Originally, it was, can we create this in just a few pills? So but obviously she asked me. Now, I'm very... I have a lot of integrity in what I do, so I'm not going to create a sugar pill for somebody. And unfortunately, when you look at most...
Like gummies.
Yeah, like gummy, you get us started. Steph liked the idea of gummies until I went into the reasons why they're difficult.
4 teaspoons of sugar in each gummy.
You know, low sugar is counted as 2 teaspoons. You give that to a child, and they think low sugar is 2 teaspoons of sugar. I wouldn't give that to a child, let alone a child with, you know, divergent condition.
We're actually working on a kid's product at the moment, and we're playing with formulations, and Lara's been diving into some really radical approaches, because also from a neurodivergent perspective, you know, we've talked about this briefly before, but, you know, I spoke with one of the leading charity, neurodivergent business charity CEOs recently, and he said, can you get omegas into chips for me? You know, he was just like, you know, because, yeah, it's beige food, you know, it's chicken nuggets and chips. And, this is autism spectrum, and you kind of go, wow, okay, we really need to change that in some way. The nutrition that we need to work on it. So actually, being us, we've reached out to a neurodivergent chef, a very famous neurodivergent chef, to say, can we create a neuronutrition based cookbook? And that's looking quite likely. So, there's so much to do, and the supplement is just the start. There's so much to do.
When I created the supplement, Steph, as I said, wanted to create a stack. And so I formulated it. And the first time I thought, maybe we're looking at like 4 pills or something like that. And after I created it, I realized it was going to be about 40 pills worth because of the amounts that I'd put in. Now, I've not just put a small amount of each. If for example, let's say a therapeutic dosage, research shows that to have a clinical impact, it's 500 milligrams of something. I've not put 5 milligrams in, which unfortunately you tend to see in a lot of multivitamins on the market because, to be a multivitamin, to get everything you want on there, unless you're going to charge a hell of a lot for something, or it's going to be, you're going to have like 20 pills, we found out, there are 2 things. The cost goes up, the number of pills somebody's taking goes up, or the quantity comes down. And usually it's the quantity because then you're ticking off the cost coming down too, and less pills. But I didn't want to give somebody a sugar pill. And, we've come at this from the position of we don't just want to create a supplement. We are addressing a need here. So when I put everything together and I put therapeutic dosages of everything in, so that meaning, I've looked at the literature, I've looked at what level of something needs to be included to actually have an impact. It looked to be like 30-ish, 40-ish pills. So that's when I spoke to Steph and I said, this is going to have to be a powder. It's going to be a drink.